Hey, how's it going? Ben here, great to see you again. Thanks for tuning in. In this video, we're going to be talking about buying property in Thailand, and more specifically, we're going to be talking about whether or not foreigners can buy property in Thailand. If you're new to this channel, my name is Ben, and I've been living in Thailand for around 4 or 5 years. On this channel, we talk a lot about living in Thailand, so maybe consider subscribing if that's something you're interested in doing or something you already do. Today we're talking about property and buying property. Now there are pretty strict laws and regulation around foreigners buying property in Thailand, and that is the reason why I'm making this video, because I don't think it's that well known. Maybe you really fancy owning some property in Thailand, and there are a few routes you could take and there are ways you can own property. However, there are very big restrictions on foreigners buying property in Thailand, and that is going to be what we're talking about today. Now, under Thai law, foreigners can't own land in Thailand, so that does put a big hurdle in buying property here. Obviously, if you buy the house, you're buying the land under it, and that is impossible here in Thailand if you're not a Thai national. Now there are a couple of routes, there are 2 routes perhaps that you can get around. You can circumnavigate these restrictions under certain circumstances, so we'll talk about those. And you can also potentially buy a condominium, as when you buy a condo, you don't own the land beneath the condo, you just own the unit. So it is legal for foreigners to own a condo and buy a condo in Thailand. However, if you want to own property, if you want to own a house, then it is a little bit more tricky. There are a couple of things you can do. You can lease the land, you could buy the land through a Thai company perhaps. So those are the sort of things we're going to talk about in this video. Those are the 3 things we're going to look at in this video. So first we'll look at buying a condo, something that any foreigner can do. There are a few restrictions that we'll talk about, so I will talk about those in a moment. We'll look at buying a condo first. Then we'll look at leasing the land, so perhaps you can lease the land for a long period, and that is possible. Let's say you have a Thai partner, perhaps you buy a house together, and perhaps you want some security in that house, even though it's a house with land. You can lease the land, so we'll have a look at that. And finally, we'll look at buying property and land through a Thai company. Once again, none of these routes are particularly easy, so there is a lot of rules and regulations surrounding foreign ownership of property in Thailand. We'll try and give a little bit of a brief overview of the sort of concept in this video, and maybe get into the more specific details in future videos. Buying property in Thailand. The first question you probably have if you came to this video is, can foreigners buy property in Thailand? And like we mentioned in the intro, it is a little bit confusing. So land ownership in Thailand is governed by the Land Code Act. Under Thai and land laws, only Thai nationals are allowed to own land or have confirmed right to own land. Foreigners cannot own land unless there is a treaty or exemption allowing the foreigner to own land in Thailand under Section 86 of the Land Code Act. Thailand currently has no treaty with any country allowing a foreigner to buy property in Thailand. Therefore, foreigners cannot purchase property in Thailand, but there are some exceptions, some of which will be amended in 2022. So the information I got from this video was largely from Themis partner, so I'll leave a link in the description to this blog post that I found that it was very useful. So if you want to go and check it out, then go to the link in the description of this video. So as we mentioned in the intro, it is actually forbidden for foreigners to own land in Thailand. So what can you do if you want to own property in Thailand? Well, let's have a look at a few options, a few exemptions you may be able to take advantage of. Let's look at a few routes to owning property in Thailand. So I did briefly mention them in the intro of this video. So the first one is to buy a condo. So it is perfectly legal for a foreigner to buy a condo under some circumstances. You could usufruct, I believe that's pronounced, however I could be incorrect, and that is the right to use and profit of something belonging to another. So it's essentially a lease, I think would be another way to word that, which may be a little bit easier for me to pronounce at least. So continuing this video, we'll probably go with lease. Also, you could buy through a company, buy through a Thai company. You can buy land through a Thai company. And first up, let's talk about buying a condo. So this is probably the most easiest route to owning a property in Thailand. It's pretty much available to anyone as long as you have the funds. And there are a few restrictions which we'll have a look at now. But yeah, this could be a great route for you. If you want to own property in Thailand and you can live in a condo, then this could be the perfect solution, because it is actually legal for foreigners to own a condo, because you don't have any rights to the ground under the condominium when you buy a sort of apartment block or a condo. So yeah, this could be a really good route for you if you're looking for property, if you're looking for a place to stay, you don't mind living in a condo, then this could be the best option for you perhaps. So when buying a condo, there are a few things that we should probably look at. First up, foreigners cannot own land in Thailand but can own condominiums, like we mentioned, as there's no rights to the land under the condominium building when you buy a single unit. Foreign ownership of the total condominium is restricted to 49%. So this is one of the details that I wanted to highlight about buying a condo. So it is one of the restrictions on buying a condominium. So foreigners are perfectly in their right to own a condo in Thailand. However, even when it comes to condos, there are some restrictions, this one being the main one, that the condominium complex must be majority owned by Thai citizens. That means in a building with 100 rooms, let's say, to keep things simple, 51 of those rooms must be owned by Thai citizens. The other 49 rooms could be owned by foreigners. So this does make the process of buying a condominium a little bit more complicated. A lot of the most popular buildings as well, in the most popular areas for foreigners to live in, are probably at maximum capacity. I know that the condominium I rented, I once inquired about buying a sort of condo in Samui. Just out of curiosity, really, I didn't have the funds, I just wanted to know what the details were, and the condominium replied to me that they were at full capacity for foreign ownership, so I wouldn't be able to buy one anyway, which is a bit of a shame. If you're looking for a condominium and you find one that you really like, and you also have to contend with the fact that they may be at capacity in terms of foreign ownership. So this is something to bear in mind. It could throw a spanner in the works of your plans, perhaps. Now, something else that I have read online, and this isn't confirmed or anything, but there may be about to be an increase in the potential foreign ownership up to 70 or 80% to help economic recovery from the pandemic. So obviously, like everywhere in the world, Thailand was hit in the economy by the pandemic, and the government are obviously looking for solutions, probably like every government around the world, to help ease that economic blow. And one of the solutions they're kind of potentially considering is increasing the percentage amount of foreign ownership in condominium blocks. I'm presuming there is quite a high demand for owning condos in Thailand by foreigners. Obviously that restriction was there. If they increase that, they could start selling more property. So that could stimulate the housing market perhaps. So maybe this will come into play. It isn't, I don't believe right now it is in play. I don't believe it's being legislated. So this is still on the maybe, but maybe we all get lucky and maybe this rule comes into effect. Maybe foreign ownership of condominiums gets increased. That would be good. But like we said before, as it stands right now, 49% is the maximum. So there must be a majority Thai-owned condos in any condominium block. In addition to those restrictions, foreigners must be eligible for ownership under Section 19. So pause this video and have a look at this screen at your leisure. I'm not going to go through all of these pieces of legislation. I'm not the best person to dissect these pieces of legislation. I'm not a lawyer or anything like that, so I don't have the best understanding of the terminology or what they truly mean. However, maybe they'll mean something to you, so maybe pause the video, have a look through, and make sure if you are considering buying property, make sure you are eligible. Now, one more thing on buying a condominium, on buying a condo or a unit in an apartment block, the building must be registered. So foreign nationals can only buy condos in buildings registered under the Thai Condominium Act. Unlicensed buildings can be common in tourist areas. So this I thought was interesting, what I read online, that the building must be licensed as a condominium. Now, anyone in Thailand, any Thai citizen could own a building and could set it up and break it up into like rooms and start renting those rooms. There's no laws specifically against doing that, so maybe they're doing that. And that may mean that the building isn't licensed as a condominium, maybe it's licensed as a private property. In that case, then you wouldn't be able to own a single unit of that building because it wasn't registered under the Condominium Act. So yeah, you have to make sure that it's a licensed condo building before you make any offers to buy a room, because you wouldn't be registered as the owner if the building isn't registered under the Condominium Act. So just one more thing to bear in mind that may be an issue when looking at condos. I'm sure that if you spoke to a real estate agent or you saw someone on an online real estate website, I'm sure that would all be printed out for you. I'm sure that would already be described. I doubt they'd be listing many condos that weren't registered condominiums, especially on English written websites. Or when you're speaking to English speaking real estate agents, I'm sure this would be already considered. And so that probably isn't a great threat to you, but I thought it would be worth pointing out that you do need to definitely make sure, especially if you're looking at buildings yourself, make sure it's a registered condominium. All right, now the next way that a foreigner can potentially own, or not necessarily own, but have a building in Thailand or have property in Thailand is through a usufruct. And we're going to call it lease from here on out because I'm not even sure I'm pronouncing that word correctly. But yeah, so leasing the building. So this refers to the temporary leasing of the property rights from one person to another. So it would be owned by someone else. However, they would be leasing the property rights, the ownership rights of the land and building to you. A usufruct reduces the restrictions on foreign nationals as they don't own the land but are given the legal rights to use the land, and typically granted for 30 years. So yeah, this would be an interesting route for you, especially if you wanted like a house with land, with a garden, all that kind of thing. That wouldn't be within your rights to go out and buy that land, buy that property. However, you could have a partner, you could have a Thai partner, business partner, romantic partner, whatever, and they could own the property, but they could usufruct the property rights to you. That could be a really good route to take, perhaps for you. Generally speaking, Thai usufructs granted to foreigners are for 30 years. However, an individual foreigner or Thai is entitled to a Thai usufruct for life as long as a Thai usufruct agreement so stipulates. This is a great advantage for foreigners in Thailand, as it means that a person with a domicile in Thailand will be able to live in and enjoy the house and the land around it for life. So when I read this specifically, I was thinking of people who have Thai families, who are married to a Thai citizen, who have Thai children, but are a foreign national living in Thailand. But who want like ownership of land but can't get it, so perhaps they could at least get some kind of legal security if the land is owned by their partner but the property rights are leased to them. So that could be one way to circumnavigate those very restrictive laws. And once again, you would never actually own the land, you would never actually own the house, but you could have the property rights leased to you for a lifetime, apparently, according to this website, which is potentially a good route for those of you in that kind of situation, or who just simply want to own a house and land in Thailand but can't, so maybe you can lease it instead. Maybe that would be an option to consider. The final decision to grant the usufruct is at the discretion of the land department official. Usufruct gives the foreign spouse the right to remain in the property upon the death of the Thai spouse. So yeah, I included a screen grab of this section of writing just because of that part at the end. So that would be something that I would be very concerned of if I was married to a Thai citizen. And if we had a house together, what would happen if they, perhaps passed or something, like some tragedy strikes, which you've got to consider when doing or when making an investment like something like property. Supposedly, the usufruct would protect you under those circumstances as well. So that's definitely something worth looking into if you're in that situation, and this is something that you need. All right, let's take a look at our third and final way of potential route for a foreigner to buy property in Thailand, and that's buying through a Thai company. All right, so it would be possible, perhaps you are an owner of a Thai company, perhaps you work for a foreign company operating in Thailand, and you can potentially buy property and land through the company. So this could be a really great route for anyone in that situation. So yeah, let's have a look at some of the details I found online about buying through a Thai company. So it is possible for a company with non-Thai shareholders to buy land in Thailand. So that is the key thing here. So it would be a company operating in Thailand that had non-Thai shareholders, potentially you. Then you could buy land in Thailand, or perhaps you could buy it, or the company could buy it for you, and so you could potentially work something out with them. I do know one person who did this, who is pretty high up at a foreign company that operates in Thailand, and they were able to buy property through that company. They were able to buy land and property through that company. But there are a few restrictions, so there's a few limitations that come with it, so maybe we can move on to some of those. So foreign companies operating in Thailand can, during the time they are operational, obtain special privileges of land ownership through the Board of Investment. So this is something that I thought I would highlight. Now, I don't know a terribly great amount about doing this. I've never done it myself. I do know someone who did it. But it does say online that it's only available while the company is operational. My fear perhaps would be that the company stopped being operational in Thailand, and then I don't know what would happen to the ownership of that land and building. So yeah, potentially some hazards, but an interesting route to potentially take if you find yourself in this situation. Now, one thing to definitely bear in mind is it is illegal for a foreigner to establish a Thai company for the sole purpose of circumnavigating Thai property laws. So this route is potentially only available to those working for a well-established company or are genuinely interested in starting a business in Thailand. This isn't a route to take if you're just trying to circumnavigate those laws. Once again, that could land you in a lot of trouble, so make sure you are doing it legitimate if this is the route you want to take. Alright, so that does conclude this video. I thought I'd do a brief overview of owning property or buying property in Thailand, specifically as a foreigner. If you enjoyed this video, if you found it informative, then consider hitting the like button. I greatly appreciate that. And if you're living in Thailand or you plan to move to Thailand, then consider subscribing as well, because I do talk about living, working, and traveling in Thailand a lot on this channel. That's what I'm all about. So consider subscribing if that interests you. Let me know in the comment section what you think. If you have any experience of owning or buying property in Thailand, I'd love to hear from you. So let me know in the comment section about that. And also let me know if there's anything specifically you want to know about buying property in Thailand. I plan to make a few more videos on the topic of property and buying property in Thailand. And if I get a lot of comments asking similar questions, then I would definitely take that as a theme for a future video. So let me know in the comment section if there's anything you want me to look into later on this theme. As always, I greatly appreciate you watching this video, especially if you made it all the way to the end, and I'll see you next time.